This is Daybreak on Trust Television, and it's that segment where we take a deep dive into the issues that we'll be discussing this morning. Public office is public trust, and is a phrase used to buttress the fact that the public officer is working for the general good of citizens of the country, and in this case, the citizens of Nigeria. Article 11 of the 1987 Constitution states in Section 1 that public officers and employers must at all times be accountable to the people, serve them with utmost responsibility, integrity, loyalty, efficiency, act with patriotism, justice, and lead modest lives. This is supposed to be the ideal situation, but it is not, as most public officers do not comport themselves in line with the provisions of the law. The prevalence of bribery and corruption, particularly in the country's public service, is huge. The House Adhoc Committee has received 39 petitions from ministries, departments, and agencies alone alleging job racketeering. This morning on Daybreak, we will be taking a look at the cancer that is eating deep into the nation's civil service. We have in the studio Dr. Emmanuel, the retired director, Police Investigation, Police Service Commission. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
You don't look retired at all. Dr. Ibe is also the managing consultant, LPS Development Consultant Limited, and the public affairs analyst. We also have in the studio Mr. Sulaiman and Mande. I hope I got that correctly.
Very correctly.
Thank you very much. Program Officer, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISCLAC. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thank you so much.
Good morning. When it comes to the ills or the disservice that the Nigerian public service does to the Nigerian people, you begin to wonder what aspect of that whole gamut of the service you want to even start taking a look at. In recent times, the civil service has become a dumping ground for political office holders who simply just split whatever slots are available for recruitment, get their cronies into those places, whether or not they are fit in terms of the right kind of candidates to go into these agencies, or whether or not they are the finest in terms of the class of qualification or the level of qualification they hold is no longer relevant. It's just splitting these numbers among themselves, selling these jobs to the highest bidder if they don't have chronics, and just lumping them on the system. However the system function is not on their business. What do you make of some of the revelations that had come out of the recruitment procedure in the Nigeria civil service lately?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think that's the kind of thing you expect when you have a system that operates based on corrupt practices, and those who perpetrate those acts of corruption go unpunished without sanctions. So in any democratic system, democracy operates based on principles, constitution, rule of law. And if you have a democratic system that violates those principles, that violates constitution, that violates the rule of law, then you expect nothing but gross misconduct by officials. In this case, we have public officials who perpetrate all acts of corruption but go unpunished. In a democratic system, it is expected that leaders play by the rules, so that they set the best possible example to the followers, right? So we have a system in Nigeria whereby those leaders don't play by the rules. In fact, they are the ones who break those rules. Yeah. You don't expect a country to work when leaders don't follow the rules.
Yeah. And in talking about rules, I mean, that's exactly what public service is about, isn't it? Bureaucracy, Dr. Ibe, where we have set of rules and systems that allows for a smooth, efficient, and productive operations of things. And we all know that the civil service is the engine room of the government, how things get done. whether it's your road construction, whether it's financing, education, healthcare, security. There's a lot of bureaucracy behind it. From your experience, what is at the heart of this dysfunctional system that we do have today that allows for things like job racketeering, for instance, to become a phenomenon?
Well, thank you once again for having me. You see, you have to look at it from various angles. First of all, it's leadership. There is this saying in my local parlance that when the mother goat is eating whatever leaves it's picking, that is what the baby goat will also pick. So the cues that the leadership gives is what these people follow. My brother talked about politicians and all that. You see, the greatest disservice you can do to a politician today is assuming you are recruiting persons into the force or into the service. And the politicians, particularly those in the National Assembly, you don't give them slots. And then you have problems, because that is what they take home to show how effective they are and how they are representing the people. They count how many people they've given jobs, you know. So aside from leadership, you also have the economy. Which aspect of the economy now do you have massive employment? Nigeria is a country of over 200 million people. And in that, people need to work. People need to get jobs to earn a living. So which aspect? So you find that in the service is bloated, because all they want to hear is load people with jobs in there. And how do you get people to take up jobs? It's through allocation. You're giving people slots. If you go to most public service institutions, people are loitering. Some don't have desks. They don't have tables to sit and write. In fact, they don't even have any schedule. All people want to hear is that you've loaded them in there.
If you have to pinpoint a point in time when we got to this particular point, when things went south, when would you say that was?
You see, it may be difficult to say exactly when, because all this, you know, it has started. I watched what happened in the House a few days ago, or maybe say weeks. It has always been there.
Always?
When I say always, I mean, you know, looking at my own experience from 1999 and all that, a situation where, like I said, take for instance, you want to recruit in immigrations, you know, all those things you see, they are facade. All those.
I think we remember the whole thing with the immigration,
yes,
when hundreds of Nigerian youths died as a result of that whole recruitment.
I don't know whether they were up to 100, but many died. So all those things you saw then was just to create the impression that, look, everybody is being given a chance. What you have is a situation where people have been allocated slots. And so there must be public display to show that.
What I want to pinpoint, and I'm not looking for an exact date, but I'm trying to understand when that shift happened. When did we begin this idea of giving slots? When, in your view, did this trend start?
When you get into it's when you get into the service that you get to know. When you are involved, you get to know. I'm looking at it from the angle of 2000 and 1999.
Right. The current democratic dispensation.
Yes, when politicians came into place, and they needed to justify their elections and all that.
Okay.
And
looking at what Dr. Abbas said, is it a question of people not understanding what rules the National Assembly members are supposed to play, or what I'm trying to push at is, you know, coming up with these inordinate expectations, and rather than reorient our people around what the deliverables should be for a House of Rep member or a senator, they have gone all the way to justify those kind of acts. What can we begin to do to have a shift? Because you can't take out honey from the tongue of somebody who has tested it. It appears that going forward we'll continue to have these things as parameters for whether or not you have performed.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the kind of things that you expect when you have an uneducated population who don't have an understanding on how politics and governance and leadership should be, who cannot hold leaders accountable and responsible for their misconducts. And that is why you see these leaders, these politicians, don't want the public to be enlightened about, one, how to hold them responsible, how to hold them accountable, for them to do the right things, right? So I think what we need to do as civil society organizations, as media, as frontline actors and all stakeholders is to see how we can leverage on all the tools that we have to educate the Nigerian population on how to hold the leaders accountable and responsible, because that's the only way that we can get out of these challenges.
You know, somebody watching at home would say, how far can we go in achieving this when we have weaponized poverty in Nigeria? So for the average Nigerian who is benefiting, all we are saying is balderdash. For him, it's what matters is get into that place, get a job that brings you something monthly. However, or whoever gets what, it's not his business. We have developed this patronage system to a very sophisticated level. And so I am thinking, have we got to the point where we should start reversing rules? And unfortunately, he talked about a bloated system that takes up a third of our income for just a few set of persons who are in themselves not because when you want to match the productivity of the services you get from today, you go to the immigration service, you want a passport, you are waiting anywhere between 6 months and 1 year. For a 5-year passport, they have taken one half of the life of the passport waiting for the passport. So how do we begin to say we are getting value for that number of persons employed and paid with taxpayers' money and all of that? Can we begin to see some kind of reversals that purge the system of this kind of people? What kind of quagmire are we in?
Well, if you look at the system, there's a kind of disconnect, right? There's a kind of disconnect whereby even the people who are given these slots don't have the capacity to deliver, right? And in every country, there are things that that country need, right? In terms of economic, social, and political advancement. And if you have people who lack capacity to deliver in terms of socio-economic and political activities, right, then you will have a kind of system that operates based on more to say selfishness, right, whereby there is no effective strategy to produce goods and services that will alleviate the kind of poverty that, for example, the Nigerian population are suffering at the moment. And that is why even the nomination of President Tinubu, for example, speaks to that fact, right? There are people who don't have the capacity to deliver, but because of political interest, political selfishness, they were nominated.
You're talking about the ministerial list for clarity.
Exactly. They were nominated to serve the people. But mind you, the Nigerian people must remember that this is a political reward. These people are not necessarily there to serve them, right? Because some of them don't have the capacity to deliver. Some of them have corruption allegation. They're under investigation, right? But they're still nominated. You cannot expect a country to work and deliver like this.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's obviously part of our story right now as a country, as a people, that integrity has truly lost its meaning in the true sense of the word, because you would see a lot of people that have this big shadow cast on them, but they're still celebrated by a majority of members of the public for whatever reason. But in talking about the politics of the situation, Sulaiman did point out how politicians have been a part of the problem. But let's talk about how that politics itself is now in the civil service. You have people in the civil service, in the public sector today, who are not necessarily members of APC or PDP, but are in a way operating in a very political manner. Say, for instance, you're given a position at an agency of government because you've been a bureaucrat all your life. You've served this country, and then you get to perhaps the highest rank. The expectation is that you're going to see a lot of people, your kinsmen, for instance, come to you and say, listen, now is an opportunity to have a bite at the national cake. Here are some of our individuals, our young people, our graduates from our community. We need you to help them out. And that would be the track record that you, unfortunately, have to live by. Because if you don't, your people are going to be the first ones to cast you out and say, what has he done for us? And this is now the bar that has been set. And I remember, as far as these investigations are concerned, just a year ago, some of these ad hoc committees were unraveling some of these developments, where one particular agency has almost 80% of its recruitment from one particular region of the country, and it's spread across all these government ministries, departments, and agencies. What, in your view, is happening to government institutions? Because we can blame all the politicians all we want, but there are people who are technocrats, bureaucrats, whatever you want to describe them, who are part of this, especially the case in point with the Federal Character Commission, where jobs are off for sale to the highest bidder now. It's civil servants who are actually doing this, and they're not your typical politicians.
You see, let me tell you, the forces of demand and supply plays in here. If you have an economy that is working, not many would like to go into public service. But you have an economy that is not working. Companies are closing down and all that. And so the only opening you have is the public service, where nobody looks at productivity. In the public service, you don't look at productivity.
We don't?
Yes, of course, yes. I mean, you can find a very incompetent person rise on the ranks to even the top. All you have is patronage. That's what you have in the public service. You don't talk about productivity. Who has been dismissed as a result of lack of productivity in the service? Tell me. So you see, if the economy is not working and you don't have this spread, that is what you have in a situation where 1,000 persons from your community are there, struggling, and you are recruiting in your agency. And so you fall back to that. And again, looking at what my brother here mentioned, you know, in the people, they've come to see performance of a legislator from the angle of what he is bringing. You know, if he's constructing, these days you find legislators talking about constructing roads, providing motorcycles as empowerment, building houses, and competing with the executive. And that is the only way the people get to understand that, oh, he is working. You know, as if you are a governor with a budget. So that is the problem, because people are out there, they want jobs, the companies have closed down, it's only government.
Is this a function, Doctor, of the inability of every system that we've put in place to stand on its own and to remain entrenched? Because there are processes when it comes to recruitment. There are different government agencies that serve as checks to one another to guarantee that this person that is fitting into this particular position that has been advertised in a national daily, for instance, is a square peg in a square hole. are we saying that all these institutions within even the ministry or the agency that are supposed to do all these checks are not functional?
I will tell you that when it comes to issue of checks, the person that is supposed to check has his own interest.
Right.
Do you know when it comes to these issues of employment, no strata is exempted. You will find a villa sending a list signed by a well-recognized person, a long list. The legislator that is supposed to serve as a check is also having his own list. Are you getting my point?
Absolutely. So everybody has his hands on the pie.
Yeah, so if you find a situation where the villa is having a list, the National Assembly is having a list, then the man sitting there, you won't have your own list. You have your own list. So the problem is, as I said, the problem of demand. The demand for job is so high, the supply is low. And because of that, all sorts of, scrambling gets into the way. A minister, you have to prove that, look, this job has been, you're a minister now, you're from my area, and then you have to get people engaged. And so that's the way they will judge you.
I bet a lot of Nigerians would say, if at the end of the day we're getting value for our money, as far as the outcome is concerned, there wouldn't necessarily be a problem, except for the obvious, which is that favoritism or nepotism itself would marginalize other people who might require such an opportunity. But what is also wrong about the way we allow nepotism and favoritism within the system itself? What is the cost of it?
The cost of it, like I said, it's a matter of competition. If you had a situation where, take for instance, a legislator, like in the advanced economies, is there to do his job, look at laws, carry out oversight functions and all that, and nobody comes knocking at his door that, I need a job, he will do his job. But in this state, in this situation, particularly here in our country, nobody looks at that. All people look at is, because the factories are gone. Where are the factories? Take a place like Abuja. People pouring into Abuja. How many factories do we have in Abuja? It's all the public service. And so what you have is a situation where a public service, in fact, the greatest thing you can do to any public institution today is for the head of service to give approval to employ. Well, it's celebrated. Whether you have, because if you look at the issue of capacity in the system, most people that are giving jobs don't have the capacity to perform the jobs they are giving.
Yeah. And of course, there's this, the first point I believe Dr. Ibe made was about the bloated system. There's this high rate of redundancy at the ministries, departments, and agencies. But if I can get your take, Mr. Sulaiman, on how you see us addressing this issue, especially if we can focus on the drama that is unfolding right now at the House of Representatives with the investigation into the IPPIS and the Federal Character Commission. We keep getting twists and turns about this story, from the chairperson at the top, who is receiving all the heat, as well as all the federal commissioners of the commission itself. And the IPPIS desk officer, who we thought was absolved of any wrongdoing, has also been fingered by some of the victims who said they've paid 1-2 million naira to get those jobs. They were pretty much enrolled into the IPPIS system. They've been getting their payments on a monthly basis without actually even having any schedule or even their appointment letters in the first place. So they're feeding off of the government's purse without necessarily doing any job. This is a common practice, and I bet if the spotlight is on other ministries, departments, and agencies of government, we'll find a lot of these situations there. Talk to me about how, when the Buhari administration doubled down on the whistleblower program, for instance, how all of these initiatives that are supposed to expose corruption within the system is not good enough to get us out of this situation that we're in.
All right, I'm glad that you mentioned corruption Because at the heart of our problem, the root cause of all our challenges are issues of corruption, okay? And one of the important jobs of a leader is to inspire confidence in the followers. A leader speaks, followers follow. A leader take an action, followers follow, right? A leader becomes productive, followers becomes productive, right? And when we have a system when corruption has become the norm and people who perpetrate those acts are not punished, are not sanctioned, go free, right? In fact, they're even celebrated, right? Then you cannot expect the system to work. We cannot expect Nigeria to produce the way it should when these kinds of things happen, right? Even when you talk about the whistleblower, right? We look at it from two angles. One is the person who commits the corruption and the person who does the blowing, right? The person who does the corruption go unpunished even when the whistle has been blown, right? What do you expect other whistleblowers will do? Because even if I expose this person, nothing will eventually happen at the end. I will end up of being victimized, right? I will end up being either killed or in jail. This is the system we have. The system has been politicized, right? In a way that makes it very, very difficult for the average Nigerian to survive, right? Talk more of thriving, right?
Right. All right, so listening to you, Doctor, one begins to wonder how we are going to reverse this system. Everybody is pretty much neck deep. It's a patronage system that we run, but understanding fully well how this whole cleanliness system has held us back and will continue to hold us back from El Dorado. How do we begin to shift? It will be difficult to wake up and you say you want to fight corruption in just every facet of government. I wonder what kind of mechanism you put in, because I know with the Obasanjo administration, it was a year ago, we had the Servicom. You have DEX officers everywhere. Now it does appear that the DEX officers are more like front DEX officers who basically say, welcome to this place. And half the time you don't even find them. You find only the stickers and an empty table. My worry is, how do we begin a paradigm shift? Some kind of system. Because you said something that's key. These things happen because of the factors of demand and supply. How do we begin to enable the private sector? Because, I mean, this is a TV studio owned by the Daily Trust. Once the recruitments go out, it is not a function of where you come from. It is whether you can deliver on this job. Your surname and perhaps your state of origin would count less for your competence and your capacity. How do we begin to replicate this kind of sectors because the people who would enable the system function are still the civil servants. They are the ones who are doubling down with all kinds of taxes. They are the ones who come up with archaic policies that make it difficult for private businesses to thrive, expand and sort for more employment. What do we do, consciously to move away from where we are and enable the private sector such that they can then begin to take, where people can have two options and say, no, I would rather the private sector because career-wise I will grow, I would interface with like minds, I would develop rapidly and even sell myself internationally.
When I was speaking, I mentioned the issue of leadership. A leadership decides where he wants the nation to go. And when you look at that, you find that as far as the public service is concerned, I am happy you mentioned it. Public service is focused on patronage. The private sector is focused on profit motive.
But by design?
By design, yes.
Public sector is focused on patronage.
Patronage.
Not service?
No. Well, when you call it whatever it is, it's all services. You are patronizing the people. Okay? Now, if you do not fix, the other factor is the economy. If you do not fix the economy, you see, I give you an example. For you to run a barbing salon today, you need to have a generator, well-functioning generator. Because if you can't be sure of NEPA to give you power to do your barbing. Now, you must buy a generator. How much is a generator for somebody running a barbing salon? And then fuel. Look at the cost of fuel for you to run. So if you power your generator, how many haircuts are you going to, and what will you charge? Now, if you look at that, why do you need to go and bother yourself to set up a barbing salon? Go pay, how much is it to one this thing? Get a job. And if there is no NEPA, you go to Federal Secretariat. At times there is no NEPA. When there is no power, everybody loiters around. You see, there is no, you don't have, what do you call it? Where you have to be told that, look, if you don't fix this between now and such a time, there is a punishment for it. Right. Here in the private sector, you must produce. Because if you don't produce, then you don't earn.
Yeah, and I guess the KPIs are quite different from the public sector to the private sector, which I think is the point of this particular conversation, where in the public sector, in the private sector, there's a lot of accountability.
That's right.
About utility, about value for money.
That's
if you're
right.
the employer, you're trying to maximize utility of the staff salary that you're paying,
That's
so he
right.
has to do his job. Whereas in the public service, there's this sense that, you know, it's a free-for-all. Anybody can come in and, you know, we can push it to the next year budget, the next year budget. But as a final thought, Mr. Sulaiman,
to pay, and
right.
it doesn't matter.
Right. As a final thought, how do we reverse engineer this mindset where Nigerians feel like, listen, all I need to get, whether it's getting into the police, the immigration, the commission or agency of government, there are these big agencies where people know for certain whether you're trying to get into CBN, whether you're trying to get
NNPC.
to agencies like NNPC and things like that, for instance, where a lot of people have this perception that, listen, if I can just buy this job, I'm going to recoup my money in the next 3, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, it doesn't matter. If they're asking for 2 million, if they're asking for 5 million, as the case is with the FCC right now, the Federal Character Commission, millions of naira go into job racketeering issue that we're talking about. How do we reverse engineer that belief system that when you get into government, that is where the security is? Because right now, as bad as the economy is, a lot of people are saying, listen, we told you, that's why you need a government job, because regardless of what happens to the economy, you still get paid, it's safe, it's secure. Whereas in the private sector, there's a lot of instability there, about uncertainty of what could happen next year. But in talking about the mindset that Nigerians have about public service, what do we need to do to reverse engineer that thought that anything goes as far as government jobs are concerned? And also with regards to the cost of this issue of job racketeering, what is the cost as far as productivity is concerned?
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that you mentioned mindset, because everything boils down to mindset, right? And the mindset of the average Nigerian, like you mentioned, is how to get a good job and make good money. It's not necessarily about how to get a job so that I can serve my country, okay? So I give you an example from personal experience, right? I work in the civil society space, right? In an NGO, so to speak. And quite often I get a lot of pressure from my family members. Go and search for a government job. This job is not secure.
There are no guarantees.
There's no security. But for me, it's all about the value. It's all about the service and the capacity that I have. Eventually, I might leave someday, but I would leave with the capacity to serve my nation, to contribute productively. Not necessarily it's not necessarily about the money that I get, right? It's more about the capacity, the connection, the network of people that I have. So this is a kind of mindset that the average Nigerian youth should have. Don't go into job because you want money. Go because you want to serve your country. Go because you have something to offer. Go because you have something to contribute. And I promise, in the process, you'll get to have the money that you need. All right? With honor and dignity at the end of the day. And talking about how the racketeering of a thing, it all boils down to curbing or cushioning the excesses of corruption. Okay? Leaders setting the best possible example. If we don't do that, I don't think if we can be able to solve this problem, it's going to be happening more and more and more.
You get that sense that you're going to deal with it ad infinitum. It's a vicious circle. Right now, the ones investigating, you get the sense that several investigations like this have been done. The carpet and the table have been shook. But at the end of the day, we don't see a lot of the prosecution going into it. We don't see heads rolling. We don't see people being punished. And what does that do then to entrench and engender this practice going forward, Dr. Abe? If we don't see people get punished, right now the investigation is unearthing a lot of disturbing situations about the irregularities, how the commissioners are communicating themselves, how they're asking, they're even buying plots of land, they're even allegedly, making certain promises ahead of a job recruitment exercise to prospective applicants and things like that. I mean, the Federal Character Commission is right now under the spotlight, but we all know that if not all, many or most of federal government agencies, or even state, for instance, agencies of government are suffering from this particular phenomenon.
You see, there was a time NDDC was being investigated. And somewhere along the line, I think the chairman of the committee investigating NDDC was screaming off the mic.
Because the revelations were too much.
It's okay, off the mic. And what was he trying to say? That, look, this man is going beyond the point where those of us investigating will be
indicted,
exposed, indicted. So when people shake the table, and we just have to take it that that's the order of the day in Nigeria. If we want to do something, let us agree that we'll do something about it. You see, all this shaking of tables is to say that you don't want to perform, we will shake the table. You have to perform. You remember in, was it 2012 or thereabout, where the House of Reps was investigating...
Securities and Exchange.
No, I think Security and Exchange, that one is one. Then petroleum.
The subsidy.
The subsidy stuff then. When tables were being shaken.
Big names were being mentioned.
What did you find? The same guys investigating were going behind to collect and, so... All those things.
And is it possible that some of these investigations are used so that the people in charge of the investigation could get some leverage so that they could also exploit the system?
That is exactly what it is. Because at the end of the day, what will come out of it? The NDDC investigations, what came out of it? The petroleum subsidy investigation, what came out of it? What will come out of this? The Federal Character Commission investigation, what will come out of it? You see, our system, we really need to come together and agree that, look, we must do something about this country. When we focus on just the members of House of Assembly, they are looking for survival on their own part. Because what business are you going to be doing that will give you the kind of money that we hear that they are grabbing from being in the house? The other day you heard somebody saying that, look, as you're going on your holiday, we are cushioning it and all that. Do you get that in the private sector? Where your holiday is being cushioned?
The senators came out and said private people get leave allowance.
Good. So the
I mean, it is quite unfortunate.
Yeah. So the problem in this country today is that the place to get easy money, that's the perception of the people, is the government.
And do you think there's enough political will to turn things around? Because, I mean, every stakeholder involved, every category of stakeholders involved, whether it's politicians, that are running the show in the executive or in the legislative arm are also indicted in it. Whether it's conspiracy of silence about what's going on because it is a means to an end, they can offer jobs, they can also bury their heads in the sand because someone from their own end is getting it, or even within the service itself, you have technocrats, bureaucrats who are not politicians who are also involved in this. How do we break this circle when it does appear that the people who are in a position of authority to do something about it, whether it's through Servicom, whether it's through the whistleblower program that is supposed to incentivize putting a spotlight on criminality such as this, because that's what it is. It's actually criminality. It's criminal to do all of these things. How do you see us breaking out of this vicious circle? Because everyone involved, everyone that has the capacity to do something about it, is also probably, complicit in this practice.
You know, we used to say that you pray for your leaders. Pray for your leaders, because that's the only way. Pray for the leader to have the political will to do that which is right. Because if that will is not there, it's a problem. And I tell you, in many situations, even when the political leader wants to do that which is right, those around him will tell him, you know, you can't do this. You know how when Buhari became president, and it also happened to Obasanjo, he was telling those who assisted him to come to power that I don't owe you. And the current president too, somewhere along the line, mentioned that I don't owe you. But you need to pray for him to have that will to continue along the line of I don't owe you. Because if he does not have that baggage to say I owe you, then he will do that which is right. And it is only when the leader says this is where we're going. Take for instance the bloated government that we have now. The cost of governance is so high and all that. How would the leader come about it? Is to put some pegs and say, no, this must not happen, that must not happen. Those who are benefiting from such will resist. But it's for you, the leader, to insist.
Yeah.
And so that is where the political will comes in.
I want to bring the next question close to home for you before we perhaps get the thoughts of Sulaiman on this one. The Police Service Commission, which you used to offer your service to. I remember a couple of years ago, there was this drama, this back and forth between the commission and the Office of the Inspector General of Police about recruitment of police officers itself. And it speaks directly to this, because I remember even with regards to getting into the force, there was a point in time where it's pretty much known. If you're trying to get into the force, this is what it will cost you if you don't have a godfather within the system. What can you tell us about that? I mean, I clearly don't expect you to spill all the tea, but give us an insight as to how this rivalry within government institutions also contributes to these sort of practices.
The squabbles you had there had to do with individual interests and collective interests. You know, the Police Service Commission is peopled by various strata of society. The management of the commission is having the representation of the media, the civil society, non-governmental organizations. You have the judiciary represented. You have the organized private sector. You have women and gender interests. And you have, of course, a police interest. And the commissioners come from various states. And they are all equals. You know, so, and you have a chairman. Now, when you have a representation like that, they would want to ensure that the interest of the public is represented. But in the case of the Inspector General of Police, it's a command structure. When the Inspector General of Police gives a directive, nobody within the system can counter it. So I want you to conduct your investigation to say, assuming each state is to get 1,000 slots per state. Are you getting my point? Now, if you go to the state of the Inspector General of Police, what happens? So what the commission was trying to do was balancing, ensure there was balance. But you know, this Oga at the top mentality will not allow, you know, for such. Because if you have balance, then everybody is treated equally. Right. But in a situation where you have one man ramming it down, it is what Oga says. So if you go into investigation, you will discover that the state of the IG then, the number of persons they got was disproportionate to what other states got. And that was the squabble of who is to do the job. So commission was saying, no, we must have a situation where there is representation, there is balance and equality. In fact, it was done on the basis of local government. So if your state has 20 local governments, assuming each local government gets 10, then you are looking at a situation where you have 200 or thereabout. But if you leave it with the police hierarchy, of course everybody will look up to the IG. What did he say? And it will be dictation.
As he wills. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what you had. The issue of recruitment is the exclusive preserve of the Police Service Commission. Police Service Commission is constitutionally empowered to appoint persons into the Nigeria Police Force, right, from the constable to. So on their own they can delegate. Yeah. But that responsibility is that of the commission.
Yeah. And we live
and the court has even made a pronouncement on that, the Court of Appeal.
Surely. Finally, Sulaiman, do we need more rules, more legislation, more initiatives, more government agencies to check all of this? What do we need as a panacea to get out of this particular mess in your view?
Well, I think what we need is more of implementation of the already existing rules. All right, we are deviating from the norm. Okay, we have rules, we have constitution, we have rule of law that are not being followed. Okay, so the best thing to do is for the government to ensure that this constitution, whatever we do, we look at the constitution, we follow the constitution. What the rule of law says, we already have it, right? But I agree that we need more initiatives in terms of how we do things, in terms of how we deliver goods and services to the people, right? We need more initiatives in the sense that, you know, we have more creative engagement with between the government and the citizens, because like I mentioned before, there is a kind of disconnect, right? It's a kind of miscommunication in the sense that, you know, the government don't even know what the people they represent feels, right? Even the pain of this fuel subsidy removal, the government don't know what people feel. So there's a kind of gap, there's a kind of disconnect, right? So when we try to bridge this gap, to bridge the gap of communication, looking at our constitution and the rule of law, right? Then I think we can be able to get things right. So we don't need any more rules, but of course we need policies, right, to make things right. Okay, but we don't need more rules because we have the rule of law, we have the constitution. All we need to do is for leaders and the politicians to operate based on rules.
I would say, you know, we need some heads to roll first, which will serve as a deterrence to the next executive director or director general of any government agency that is perhaps thinking about doing something like this. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the program. We really do appreciate you for your insight on this analysis. Thank you so much for stopping.
Thank you for having us. Yep.
All right, that's it on this conversation. We continue to look forward to the president to develop the what would you call it now? The wheel. But some people would say if you have a 48 list of ministers, where would that wheel come from? But we hope for some kind of miracle. He talked about the need to pray. We're a very praying nation. And I hope that someday the Almighty will look down upon us with mercy. That's it on this segment. We'll take a short break. When we return, the show continue. Please don't go away.